In 1973, a religious cult turned San Francisco into a hunting ground for white people. The Death Angels had one twisted mission. Each member needed to kill a certain number of blue-eyed devils to earn their wings. This wasn't random violence. They had a point system. Different victims were worth different scores. They used coded messages to coordinate attacks across the city. For 179 days, terror gripped San Francisco. People were afraid to walk the streets. The police formed a massive task force, but the killers seemed to always stay one step ahead. The cult's leader was a charismatic minister who preached racial war from the pulpit. He had cells operating across the entire country. Then, one member's conscience finally broke. He walked into a police station and confessed everything. Names, locations, the entire conspiracy. The investigation that followed changed how police handle organized hate crimes forever. But by then, the damage was already done. The Death Angels had turned a major American city into their personal battlefield. In 1963, a group of Quebec separatists turned bank robbery into a military science. The Front de Libération du Québec wasn't just stealing money. They were funding a revolution. Each heist was planned like a war operation. They studied bank employee schedules for weeks, memorized escape routes, used stolen getaway cars. Their masterpiece? A Caisse Populaire in Montreal. They watched the bank for months, knew exactly when guards changed shifts, timed the robbery down to the minute. On a cold December morning, they struck $40,000, gone in under 3 minutes. But this wasn't about the money anymore. The FLQ used their robbery profits to buy weapons and explosives. What started as bank heists escalated into kidnapping and murder. The RCMP had been watching, infiltrating their cells, building cases. When the FLQ kidnapped a British diplomat and killed Quebec's labor minister in 1970, Canada declared martial law. Hundreds arrested. The revolution crushed, all because a few bank robbers thought they could overthrow a government, one sandwich at a time. In the 1980s, one man built the largest insider trading empire in Wall Street history. Ivan Boesky wasn't just stealing information. He was running a $2 billion criminal network. His system was brilliant. He paid millions to investment bankers and lawyers for merger secrets. He used coded language in phone calls. He moved money through offshore accounts to hide the payments. Boesky's biggest source was Dennis Levine, who sold him insider tips for $100 million. Together with junk bond king Michael Milken, they controlled massive trades before deals went public. For years, they were untouchable. But the SEC noticed something strange. Boesky's trades were too perfect, too lucky. They started wiretapping his phones. The conversations they recorded were devastating. Boesky discussing illegal payments, planning trades based on stolen information. When the FBI arrested him, Boesky made a shocking decision. He became an informant. His testimony brought down dozens of traders and revolutionized how financial crimes are investigated. The king of arbitrage had become Wall Street's biggest snitch. In 1897, a con man built an entire fake town to steal from gold miners. Jefferson "Soapy" Smith controlled the criminal underworld of Alaska during the gold rush. But his operation was unlike anything law enforcement had ever seen. Smith didn't just run simple scams. He created a complete illusion. He built fake businesses throughout town. A telegraph office that charged miners to send messages that were never sent. Shops staffed by his own men posing as happy customers. Even fake law enforcement on his payroll. When prospectors arrived with their gold, they walked into Smith's elaborate trap without knowing it. His crew of trained con artists would befriend the miners, gain their trust, then systematically empty their pockets through rigged card games and phony investment schemes. For years, Smith's criminal empire operated in plain sight. But in 1898, everything unraveled. When Smith tried to recover stolen gold from a cheated prospector, a shootout erupted on Juneau Wharf. Smith was killed in the gunfight. One bullet ended Alaska's most sophisticated criminal organization. In 1971, a man in a business suit pulled off the only unsolved hijacking in American history. Dan Cooper boarded Northwest Orient Flight 305 on a rainy Thanksgiving Eve. He looked like any other businessman. Briefcase, black tie, calm demeanor. 20 minutes into the flight, he handed the flight attendant a note. "I have a bomb." He opened his briefcase, showed her the dynamite, then politely asked for $200,000 and 4 parachutes. Cooper wasn't your typical hijacker. He ordered bourbon and soda, tipped the flight attendant, even helped her tie down the aft stairs before his jump. At 8 p.m. somewhere over southwestern Washington, Cooper stepped into a freezing rainstorm wearing only his suit. He vanished completely. The FBI launched one of the longest investigations in their history. 45 years, 800 suspects, thousands of tips. They found a few deteriorated bills in 1980. Nothing else. No body, no parachute, no Cooper. The gentleman bandit who jumped into legend and was never seen again. In 1995, a 28-year-old trader destroyed Britain's oldest bank with nothing but fake paperwork and a secret account. Nick Leeson worked for Barings Bank in Singapore. To his bosses in London, he was a golden boy making millions in profits. But Leeson was running the most elaborate fraud in banking history. He created a hidden account numbered 88,888. Every losing trade went there. Every mistake got buried. When auditors came asking questions, he forged documents. When his losses grew, he made bigger bets to try winning it back. The time difference between London and Singapore gave him hours to manipulate the books before anyone noticed. For 3 years, he convinced everyone he was a genius trader. Then the Kobe earthquake hit Japan. Markets crashed. His secret bets lost everything. In one weekend, Leeson's hidden losses reached over $1 billion. He fled Singapore on a plane to Germany, where police arrested him. Barings Bank, which had survived Napoleon and 2 world wars, collapsed overnight. All because one man knew how to hide the truth. In 1973, executives at Equity Funding created the most elaborate corporate fraud in history. They didn't just steal money, they invented an entire fake insurance company. 64,000 fake policies, $2.1 billion in fictional coverage, all stored on early computer systems that no one knew how to properly audit. The scheme was massive. Hundreds of employees were in on it. They created fake death certificates, phony medical records, and elaborate policy files. When auditors called to verify policies, the company hired actors to pretend to be the fake customers. For years, investigators couldn't crack the digital deception. The computer records looked perfect, but one employee finally broke. A whistleblower came forward with the truth. When the news hit, Equity Funding's stock collapsed overnight. Investors lost everything. The FBI had to invent new computer forensics techniques just to unravel the fraud. This case pioneered white-collar crime methods still used today, all because early computer systems had one fatal flaw. No one knew how to properly investigate them. Did you know a mafia hitman made 30 people vanish so completely that police couldn't even find traces of bone? Tommy Patera wasn't your typical mobster. He was a methodical killer for the Bonanno crime family with a disturbing hobby: taxidermy. Patera used his knowledge of anatomy to dismember bodies with surgical precision. He dissolved remains in chemicals, buried parts across multiple states. For years, victims simply disappeared. No bodies, no evidence, no cases. The FBI knew people were dying, but they couldn't prove murder without proof of death. Patera discussed his work in coded language, called dismemberment, taking apart the merchandise, referred to burial sites as storage locations. But technology caught up with him. New DNA analysis techniques found microscopic traces at old crime scenes. Ground-penetrating radar-located burial sites he thought were hidden forever. FBI wiretaps finally captured him, giving detailed instructions about body disposal to other mobsters. The evidence was overwhelming. Patera got life in prison. His case revolutionized how law enforcement investigates organized crime. Sometimes the perfect killer isn't perfect enough. In 1990, 2 men pulled off the biggest art heist in American history by simply knocking on the door. The Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston was home to priceless masterpieces: Vermeer, Rembrandt, Degas, worth over $500 million. At 1:13 in the morning on March 18th, 2 men dressed as Boston police officers approached the museum. They told the security guards they were responding to a disturbance call. The guards let them right in. Big mistake. The fake cops immediately handcuffed the guards and locked them in the basement. For the next 81 minutes, they methodically selected 13 artworks. But here's the strange part. They left behind pieces worth even more money. They cut paintings from their frames with a knife, damaged priceless art in the process. Then they vanished into the night. 34 years later, the FBI is still investigating. They've followed leads involving the Irish Republican Army, organized crime, and international trafficking networks. The empty frames still hang in the museum today. The $10 million reward remains unclaimed. In 2015, 2 convicted murderers pulled off one of the most elaborate prison escapes in American history. Clinton Correctional Facility was maximum security. Steel walls, armed guards, electronic surveillance everywhere. David Sweat and Richard Matt spent months planning their breakout. They seduced a prison employee named Joyce Mitchell, convinced her to smuggle in power tools, hacksaw blades, drill bits. Night after night, they cut through steel walls in their cells, used dummy heads to fool guards during bed checks, They crawled through a maze of pipes and tunnels beneath the prison, navigated in complete darkness for hours. Finally, they emerged through a manhole cover 6 blocks away, leaving behind a taunting note that said, "Have a nice day." The manhunt was massive. 1,300 law enforcement officers, helicopters, bloodhounds, the entire region on lockdown. For 23 days, they evaded capture, but then police cornered them near the Canadian border. Richard Matt was shot and killed. David Sweat was captured alive. The investigation exposed shocking security failures. Joyce Mitchell got prison time for her role. The perfect escape, ruined by poor planning on the outside. For 30 years, one man robbed over 50 banks and never got caught. Carl Gugasian wasn't your typical bank robber. He was an army ranger who turned his military training into the perfect crime. He called himself the Friday Night Bank Robber. For months before each heist, Gugasian would watch his targets. He mapped out escape routes, studied employee schedules, timed security responses down to the second. He only struck on Fridays before holidays when banks held the most cash. His disguises were flawless. His planning was military precision. He'd be in and out before anyone knew what happened. Bank after bank fell to his methodical approach. The FBI had no leads, but after 3 decades of perfect robberies, Gugasian made one tiny mistake. During a heist, he dropped a single glove. That glove contained his DNA. Forensic science had advanced since his first robbery. What seemed like nothing became everything. The DNA linked him to robbery after robbery across multiple states. The most successful bank robber in American history, brought down by one forgotten glove. In 1976, a bank robber pulled off the most audacious heist in French history without firing a single shot. Albert Spagliari had his eyes on the Société Générale bank vault in Nice, but instead of walking through the front door, he chose a different route, the sewers. For months, Spagliari and his crew tunneled through the underground maze beneath the city. They mapped every pipe, every turn, until they reached directly under the bank. They didn't just dig randomly. They built a complete replica of the vault to practice on. On a quiet weekend, they struck, drilled through the vault floor, disabled every alarm, spent 2 full days looting hundreds of safe deposit boxes, millions of dollars worth of valuables, gone. When police arrived Monday morning, they found a handwritten note. Without weapons, without violence, without hate. But here's where it gets even crazier. When they finally caught Spagliari, he escaped from the courthouse by jumping through a second-story window onto a waiting motorcycle. He lived as a fugitive for the rest of his life and was never recaptured. Before he turned 21, Frank Abagnale Jr. had fooled everyone. He posed as an airline pilot and flew over 1,000,000 miles for free. He practiced medicine in a Georgia hospital. He passed the bar exam and worked as a lawyer. He even taught college students as a professor, all while running a check fraud operation across multiple countries. Frank studied every detail. He memorized pilot terminology. He forged Pan Am credentials so perfectly that airlines never questioned him. He exploited the trust-based systems of the 1960s. For years, FBI agent Joseph Shea chased him across the globe. But Frank stayed one step ahead through pure social engineering and quick thinking. Banks lost millions. Frank lived like royalty. Then French police finally caught him in 1969. After prison and extradition battles, something incredible happened. The FBI hired him. The master criminal became their consultant. He helped design the modern check security features we use today. Frank Abagnale proved that the best way to catch a thief is to think like one. In 2007, a Canadian man with zero criminal history created the most perfect counterfeit money the world had ever seen. Frank Barassa worked alone in his garage with basic printing equipment, but his fake $20 bills were so flawless they fooled everyone. Banks accepted them. Businesses passed them along. Even the Secret Service couldn't tell the difference. Barassa spent months researching everything: the exact paper blend, the chemical composition of the ink, every tiny security feature. He printed $250 million in fake 20s. For years, his counterfeits circulated undetected across America. The Secret Service knew something was wrong, but couldn't crack the case. Then they found one bill, one single serial number that didn't match their records. That tiny clue led them across international borders straight to Barassa's garage operation. But here's the twist that shocked everyone. When they caught him, Barassa made a deal. He helped authorities catch other counterfeiters and even improved currency security. The perfect counterfeiter became the government's best weapon against counterfeiting. In 1978, a Bulgarian writer was murdered in London with the most ingenious weapon ever created: an umbrella that fired poison. Georgy Markov was a dissident who criticized Bulgaria's communist government on BBC radio. The secret police wanted him dead. On a busy London bridge, a stranger bumped into Markov with an umbrella. Markov felt a sharp sting in his leg. The man apologized and disappeared into the crowd. 3 days later, Markov was dead. Doctors found something incredible during the autopsy. A tiny platinum pellet, smaller than a pinhead, lodged in his thigh. The pellet was hollow, filled with ricin, one of the deadliest poisons known to man. The umbrella had been modified with a compressed air mechanism. One press of the trigger fired the pellet through a tiny hole in the tip. Scotland Yard traced the weapon back to the Bulgarian Secret Service and the KGB, but the killer was never caught. The umbrella murder exposed the deadly creativity of Cold War assassins and changed how governments protected dissidents forever.